Breaking news alert, emergency pod time. The PGA Tour has revolutionized the way we are going to look at professional golf starting in the year 2028. Bringing on alongside me tonight, the founder of Read the Line, a man who was in the press center when Brian Rolapp rolled out the news just yesterday at 10 a.m. to the public. Keith Stewart, how are you doing? Coming to us live from the Travelers. Great to see you, friend.
Joe, I'm fantastic. And, I tell you what, I'm a huge Tiger fan. When he walked out yesterday, I said, you know what, this is for real. And I tell you what, I don't know that they used the private jet to come up from Ponte Vedra Beach. I mean, every single executive that I could name was here. This is a big deal. And I tell you what, my first reaction, my first impression of the whole thing, this is good for you and I. And it's good for those in our industry.
It's good for people who love golf. Absolutely. I wanted to start right there, actually. Given the obvious, everything that Tiger's been through publicly, from the accident to the arrest to the rehab and everything that followed, I think it says a lot that the PGA Tour still stands with him. They clearly are not distancing themselves at this point from Tiger Woods. If anything, they're putting him front and center on one of the most important moments in the tour's future. Were you surprised to see him walk out first?
Yes, genuinely surprised. And there was kind of like a confluence of events that came together right as we were all getting ready to go down to the clubhouse and sit in that room. We get the email like 10 minutes before the press conference is going to happen. So everyone's kind of like scrambling to read through this thing. And my brain was kind of like, oh, this is what they're doing. This is, what am I going to ask a question about? And then next thing I know, we sit down and then out walks Tiger Woods. And I was like, well, that makes perfect sense, but I hadn't considered it. So I was definitely surprised. And there's no doubt in my mind that we've heard a lot of this talk, how hard Tiger's been working on this FCC committee. And I think it was probably part him and part tour to say, hey, look at this. We have Tiger's blessing on all of this.
Yeah, right afterwards, of course, he introduces, and then came the long-awaited time in front of the microphone again for Mr. Brian Rolapp. Major changes approved by the Future Competitions Committee that are going to essentially reshape the PGA Tour operations beginning in 2028. These were not small tweaks. These are substantial, potentially monumental changes to how the tour is structured, how players compete, and what the future of professional golf looks like. What was the feeling like in that room? Before we get into the details of the different aspects of what he discussed, how did you think he handled the press conference? How was it received by the media in attendance?
Brian Rolapp, for all intents and purposes, is the perfect guy for this job. It seems like, Joe. He handles these moments with tremendous aplomb. I mean, he speaks well. There are times when definitely he doesn't give you anything, but he does that in a respectful and polite manner. I think probably the biggest takeaway I had initially was that the media is not normally a happy place, right? You know this. The media center, the general golf media, everybody was pretty charged up about this.
Keith, it's funny because I feel like much of us in the media tend to be very critical and doom and gloom around the PGA Tour, but the PGA Tour is succeeding. You look at the numbers everywhere. Viewership is way up, and I think this is another element of something that we can be genuinely excited about and say, this product is going to work. It's headed in the right direction. It's doing so under the right leadership, and the players appear to be bought in now, and the future is bright for guys like us, right?
Yes, very much so. Joe, simply put, we will have more meaningful events during the Cup season than we've had in the past. And that's the key in all of this. We will have more meaningful events. I don't consider, no disrespect to any of the mini tours, PGA Tour Americas, Korn Ferry, etc. Here in the States, we are going to have more meaningful events to cover, and that is a good thing.
Let's kind of break this down into segments, Keith. So the tour is branching off into two independent series, the Challenger Series and the Champion Series. Let's break them down kind of one by one. First, I'm going to bring up this graphic on what was announced for the new Championship Series. So we're talking about 23 to 24 events. That is going to be inclusive of either the Ryder Cup or President's Cup, the four majors, and the Players' Championship. We are moving to full 72-hole stroke play events, 36 hole cut, top 65 in ties like we asked for, $20 million purses. The tour schedule gets kind of condensed in this February to August mark, roughly around 120 player fields. And players who are on the championship series will be on that series all season. Players who are on the other tour will be on that tour all season. There's going to be less fluidity and guys moving from tour to tour. Do I got the basic nuts and bolts here correct? Or do you have anything to add about this new announcement?
No, tremendous job. The only one thing I'll add is that there's no alternate list and there's no sponsors exemptions at this level. So if they invite 120 guys and let's say Rory and 10 of his buddies don't show up, that's the field. They're not going to be pulling guys up. So for the championship series, you're spot on. We can move on.
You know, it brings to mind one thing that I had a question about, and Scotty had some comments today about how they don't like playing 3 weeks in a row, right? Well, I think the nature of 23 to 24 events within a 7-month span means we're going to get a lot of that. Do you expect to see a lot of these guys, maybe the top end guys, picking and choosing events throughout that stretch there? Or is the expectation that they show up and compete for the sake of not only the best interest of the tour, but the best interest of the sponsors and tournaments who are ponying up the big purse?
I think Rory will still be Rory, and I think Ben Griffin will still be Ben Griffin, right? So Rory's going to come infrequently, and Ben Griffin's going to play every week. And there's no mandatory number that we've heard so far. You know, we've always known that you had to hit 15 events in a year of PGA Tour events to maintain your status. You know, Tiger used to always hit that 15, 16 number, including majors. But the reality of it is, to answer your question right now, for what we know, I think most guys are going to play the same amount of events that they normally do play. We do know this, though, Joe. There are going to be 7 essentially off weeks.
Yeah, obviously, depending upon when those come within that schedule there, I think it'll be the natural break points about every 3 weeks would be my assumption. Post-major championships, the weeks where events are not doing well now on the schedule. My hometown event, the Cognizant, I'm sure will be an off week. Zurich, these type of spots on the schedule, CJ Cup, that feel like natural breaks will probably be what actually exists.
So in talking to tour officials, the week after a major, they're going to play. And the reason for that is that majors build up interest. And then the week after, there's still a ton of interest. And then it kind of cycles down, building up to the next major. So I would plan on the week after majors, there being golf. Now, you are right, though. Areas where, like, we moved from the West Coast to Florida, where the COG has really taken a hit, but it's an event that fans know. Those are the ones they're going to go to first and say, hey, it's available to you if you want one of these 7 off weeks. Same thing with Zurich, with that little lull there. So where the normal cadence of where guys were taking weeks off in this calendar year and where they will do it again in 2027, that's where you're going to see those off weeks. It's probably not, I mean, from what they told me, it's just not going to be the weeks after majors.
Yeah, the PGA Tour did also say that they've initially already lined up a set of 10 events that will be relatively familiar, and they're looking into new markets. More on that later when we talk about the schedule. But the bigger change, I would say, is the addition of the Challenger Series. Yep. So we're looking at 20-plus events, major upgrade in fields going to 144 players, $4 million purses, which, correct me if I'm wrong, is a significant step up from what they're used to playing for. This is not a Corn Ferry Tour. This is something different in a level up.
Well, Corn Ferry is like about $1.5 million purse. LPGA is anywhere from like 2.5 to like 3.25 million. These guys are getting a good solid purse for 20 events. There's no doubt about that. It is the equivalent of what Puerto Rico was maybe a couple of years ago, where it's a $4 million purse for, a secondary event like during Bay Hill or one of those weeks that we've seen in the past. The winner gets about 800,000. I tell you what, you're going to make a decent living being on that tour.
Yeah, and just the amount of guys that they're going to pull in. I think if you're talking about 120 guys on the championship series, these are going to be a lot of names that we recognize the majority of players, it's not going to be like signature events where guys are kind of on the outside looking in. The big names will all be there, but these events will still provide compelling content for guys like us to cover. They're going to have 7 elevated weeks where they're kind of solo and they have the grand stage. And then the rest of the weeks, they are going to run concurrently with the PGA Tour, following that same February to August timeline in terms of a schedule.
And, this was once this whole new structure gets going, it's very easy to understand how players will move, how they'll be promoted, how they'll relegate. But in the beginning, I'm like, where are these middle guys coming from? Where is the Challenger Series players coming from? And the reason, and you would think the same way, Joe, and I tweeted this out, but I asked Brian Rolapp that question during the press conference. And I said, initially, what will the process be to fill the Challenger Series? And, he very nicely said, basically, we don't know, but everyone will know by the start of the 2027 season. And what I mean by that is that, are we going to fill? I know we're going to get some DP World Tour guys. We're going to get some PGA Tour U guys. We're going to get some guys that fall down from the championship series. But if they're having fields of 144 players max, you still need like 80 guys. Where are those 80 guys coming from? Yeah. And what I'm thinking about is that I would kind of like that to be more Johnny Kiefers than I would like it to be like past champion status guys. I don't do any drive-bys on any of the older guys, right? But like, you know what I'm saying? And like the tour has been very good over the years to like protect those older past champions. They give them career money lists, exemptions, all of these things, sponsors exemptions, one after another. Like, so for me, I was trying to get an idea if they're going to pull more of the youth, or if is it going to be 50-50, and it didn't seem, they definitely didn't have an answer to that question. I think that the pack led by Lucas Glover is certainly going to lean in one direction. And I think the tour certainly wants to lean in the direction of news stories like you and I would.
Okay. So is the Challenger Series what we think of today as the Korn Ferry Tour, or is the Korn Ferry Tour done? Is it now this?
No, the Korn Ferry Tour still exists. PGA Tour America still exists. DP World Tour still exists. All of these things still exist. This is why there's more meaningful events for us to wager on, for us to be fans of, for us to watch, because this is like a whole new tour almost, Joe, with 20 events on it. And the PGA Tour as it exists right now, I think they have 315 cards out there. Now, a lot of those are conditional. The first 100 get their card and they're on the tour. The other like 200 guys are these guys that we're talking about that bounce back and forth between Korn Ferry right now, or the ones that play in the John Deere or the Cog or the Rocket. And, they have like maybe 2 or 3 chances a year to try to get into events unless they play really, really well. It's those guys, that next 100 that are going to be there, and then the young up and comers on Korn Ferry. That's what the Challenger Series is going to start as. And then over time, the meritocracy of it all will weed out those that don't belong, and we'll put more of who do.
Yeah, and what I like about it is, they've gone away with the Aon Swing 5 and ways to kind of play your way up. There's one way to be immediately elevated to the championship series. You got to win twice. Otherwise, you got to finish in the top 20 at the end of the year, and you'll be elevated into that series for the following season. Am I correct on that?
One more. You got to have the Aaron Rai rule. If you win a major, if you win a major like he did, like after he played at Myrtle, if you win a major and you're on the Challenger Series, you'll automatically get a promotion, just like the double win.
Okay. This is the one that I'm probably the most vague on, so we'll need your help on this. The fall season. What happens to the fall? I saw people speculating that it kind of turns into essentially an international series event. Is this where you expect the national opens to fall? The Scottish Open, the Irish Open, maybe we bring on the Italian Open, the Canadian Open. We get these events and we slam them into the fall. Explain what this portion of the season is going to look like.
Joe, the simplest way to put this is that there's 2 parts to it. The first includes championship series players. It includes people that would have earned the right through the previous season to get into the championship series before the next year starts. And there's going to be 2 to 4 international events. An easy one to start with would be the Bay Current. Maybe that becomes the Japan Open. But then if you look at where maybe Live has been really successful, South African Open, the Australian Open, the French Open, the Irish Open, any of those that fit in the schedule and can kind of help maybe give a little bit of a boost to the DP World Tour, or to give the tour an opportunity to say, hey, we're trying to push the game globally. There's going to be a small subset of tournaments that, hey, is Scotty Scheffler going to play in that? No, he's going to go play at home with Bennett and his family. But there are going to be guys that are going to play in those events that are going to be big names. That's one aspect of it. Then once that's complete, there's going to be this last chance, or what we think of as the fall series of 4 to 6 events that some of those names will be very common to us. And that's the last chance guys will have in order to try to earn a spot on the championship series. And that's going to happen in the late fall. It's probably going to be a lot of the same, Mexico Open comes to mind there, the old Vidanta Vallarta, something like that. That's the fall in a nutshell. And what's going to be interesting is that you're going to see a little more of that version of the fall, the last chance fall, not the international events, but in 2027, next fall, we're going to see how that's going to kind of shake down, because they need to start using that in order to set the championship series for 2028.
Yeah, one of my questions would be, and you covered that greatly and explained it very nicely for me, so thank you. The DP World Tour kind of runs their race to Dubai essentially around this time period. So, they have the tournament in Dubai, they have the Dunhill, they have the BMW. Do you expect they run some of these events together as part of this? Like, they have this strategic alliance. Where do you think the intermingling of the DP World Tour and the PGA Tour falls within this fall season or last chance swing?
There definitely has to be some overlap. With the holidays and everything, there's only so many weeks, Joe. Now, one of the things that the tour is doing is that they're going to make a huge shift to Q School. They are going to start the early stages, the pre-qualifying of Q School, as we know it, to get on the Corn Ferry Tour in July, soon after the kids get out of school. They want to start that process earlier because they feel like they're very limited in where they can go in December. And there's going to be a number of cards that's going to get you out of Q School into Corn Ferry, and from what it sounds like, Challenger Series, which is going to be a big deal. It's going to go back to the way Q School was 25 years ago when I would go make a run at it. So that's an exciting aspect of that. And it's also going to happen at a time of the year where it's in the summer and they're just going to have so many more venues available to them to use for these guys.
All right, this is what I'm most excited about. You've known me for a while. I've been flying the banner proudly, screaming at the top of the mountains for match play. We are finally going to get it, it appears, back for the Tour Championship. This is a little graphic based on the top 16 right now. I'm just excited that they're committing to this, that the players are for this. We'll talk about the potential venues and what came out from an ESPN piece later. But how do you envision, Keith, and what do you know about this playing out? Are we talking about a 2-week kind of match play tournament? Is there a stroke play component to this? I know you may not know everything, and they might not have this completely ironed out yet either. But what do you expect?
This is what I'm going to call factual speculation, which means that there are facts of things they're considering, but it's speculative on what is actually going to make it through the vote. The first thing you have to understand is that there's going to be a regular season champion. That is going to be what we think of as the FedEx Cup champion. Let's just call him the Tour champion. So what that does is then when they go into these playoffs, it allows them a lot more of an opportunity that they don't feel indebted to, if Scotty was the regular season champion, to then give him strokes or make sure that he makes it to the final round or any of those things. These are going to be almost two independent entities. So the season ends, we have a regular season champion. That guy is the cup winner. And then they're going to go into a 2-week playoff system. If I had to make an educated guess right now, the first week is going to be some form of what we're used to at a BMW or a St. Jude, where 72-hole stroke play gives us a number of players that are going to qualify for the next week. And the next week is going to be a made-for-TV event, which is why people started talking about these crazy venues. The exact words from Brian Rolapp, you can read off, if you look at the PDF or all the documentation, places that we've never been before, places that might surprise you. So that's why, and then, there was some confirmation that they're we would love to go to Pine Valley. And I'm thinking to myself, having been there, I was wait a second, the footprint there can't handle Well, it could, Joe, if it was a made-for-TV event and they didn't mind how many fans showed up. Like, say, they gave 2,000 tickets out. They didn't need hospitality, and they only had 16 guys on property to play matches for a couple of days. You get a lot more flexibility that way. The name I heard the most bounce around was Bandon Dunes. I think the tour wants to do something to go to these pop culture venues that they're just not using because the footprint is such a challenge. So, I don't know, they go to Sand Valley, but maybe like that's the type of place, a Whistling Straits, Abandoned Dunes, something that really shows up on TV. I don't know that Cypress Golf Club is a good spot for Xander to play a match against Scotty. Right? Yeah. It's not long enough. It's not big enough. But some of these modern, really, really fresh faces that everyone talks about, Stream Song, whatever it may be. That's where I think all of this is going to go. So you're going to get a stroke play portion that's going to advance to a match play portion. I was told that number is going to be somewhat conservative to start, so I'm thinking it's going to be in the 16 range. 8 seems too conservative, but 16 seems about right. And then there was a lot of discussion because one of the reasons that match play is such an unknown is that a guy can get hot with the putter like a Wyndham, make 200 feet of putts, and then he beats everybody in the world. Doesn't matter who they are. Mm-hmm. Tiger in 2000, you're beating the guy. And TV doesn't want to see that. Sponsors don't want to see that. The fans, I think they just want match play. But there's a way to do it. And one of the things or ideas, concepts that they're bouncing around, and you don't hear a lot about this on the internet, but there's such a thing as medal match play, which means that your match has to be 18 holes and it's your total score at the end. Now, if you're tied, you'd play a 19th hole. It'd be sudden death. But, they used to do these on Shell's Wonderful World of Golf. You play a whole round, and then you decide that's good for TV, it's good for the fans, and it's good for the best players because you give them more hole. The more holes you give Scotty, the better chance he has of advancing through the bracket. So I think you're going to see some combination of that, and that's how the venue comes together. That's how all of this gets a lot more exciting. I mean, think about what they can do if they weren't worried about 15,000 people, 3,000 volunteers, all these people at the Tour Championship, the types of venues they could go to. They could do some really, really cool things in golf. And quite honestly, it's probably the only way they can compete with YouTube golf, which I think for the Tour is a pretty savvy idea.
Yeah, I mean, you could go full closed curtain and just produce the whole thing for YouTube as long as you have the players sign an NDA. But I think realistically, like the concern has always been, and from my perspective, how do you advantage the players who had the better season? And I think providing that trophy and obviously the bulk of the money that comes with it in terms of the FedEx Cup champion or whatever they end up calling it, will be the winner in points of the championship series. And this is kind of a secondary champion that they're crowning. Do you think in the match play that there is any way to, I've always thrown around the idea of having the higher seed start with an advantage in those matches. So maybe the higher seed starts one up. Do you think they're playing around with any sort of these ideas, or is it just as long as we have the top 16 guys, we're okay with how it shakes out?
Joe, they're playing around with a lot of ideas.
Okay.
A lot. This much I can tell you though, the guys themselves don't like the advantage. So if it goes to the board vote, it goes to the players and the guys that are designing all of this, most of them are not even they're not going to broach that conversation. I think it's really important for people to understand if there's a regular season champion and they draw like a thick line in the sand, then they can have a lot more flexibility with what they do at the playoffs. And if you want to call them playoffs, then there has to be some form of like real elimination. And those are the types of things they're tossing around. Yes, they want Scotty versus Rory at the end. We all want that in some way, shape, or form. But I think the way that they're setting themselves up here, they're setting themselves up for success. And I think that will also, with Brian's leadership, allow them to enhance whatever media offerings they're getting from the broadcast company that's putting all of this together. So you could see a lot of the undercurrent that's going on here with so much of this, Joe, coming from Brian Rolapp and like, hey, like this is how you build, a fanatic base of consumers that really like they just can't stop watching all of this, right? They can't stop wagering on it. They can't stop thinking about it. They can't stop going to the events. And the whole idea of scarcity, as it played out before, when it comes down to, it really wasn't scarcity. It was the idea, scarcity wasn't, we were losing events. We've actually gained meaningful events we've limited time. So if you want to, he was very quick to say, if you want 47 weeks of golf, we're still giving you 47 weeks of golf. But you want the meat on the bone, it's going to be much tighter, and that's where the scarcity comes in. I envision, well, you're probably going to want to talk about schedule, so I don't want to. You drive the bus. I'm just riding.
Yeah, let's talk about it now. But I just want to say, like, you did a great job of explaining all the facts there, right? And everything that came out. And you sent me, of course, you were privy to the PDF that came out about an hour before the press conference, which I poured through. I read the whole thing start to finish. Then we got Brian Rolapp's word. You've been in the media center for the last 2 days. So your insights on this stuff are invaluable and as good as anybody in the industry. You mentioned guys are playing around with ideas in terms of match play still. I thought we'd have a little fun and play around with some ideas on the schedule, as you alluded to. So we're talking about, for the sake of this, roughly 16 events. I'm going to bring up a little chart now that I made, some PDF slides that I know you always enjoy. These are my locks, okay? These are the events that I envision are not going anywhere on the PGA Tour. Half the events of the 16, I think they're going to start with Phoenix, Genesis, API. Players is, of course, in there. They talked about 15, and, of course, it's obviously in there. RBC Heritage will probably be right after the Masters. Truist, I mean, I just feel like they're always going to go back to Charlotte. They're always going to go back to Clayo. Memorial and Travelers, where you're at right now. Those are my absolute locks that there's 0% chance in my mind they aren't on the new schedule in terms of the championship series. Would you agree with all 8 of those, or is there one that you think may be on the fence?
None of those are on the fence. Those are graffiti on the wall. For sure.
Here's what I got next. Here are my probables. In this, you may have some pushback on. Here are my next up. Pebble Beach. I think Pebble Beach, is just my pure speculation, may move on the schedule. I think they want to get out of the rain on Pebble. I think that it could be that stroke play component right before the match play at the end of the season could move to Pebble. I do feel like there's a commitment now to the Cadillac, an event that was just kind of enacted. The one that I'm curious about are the next 2. I chose the Houston Open. I love that. I feel like the players like that, but I can see where we need something in Texas. I can see where people will say the obvious choice there is Colonial, and the Schwab is the longest standing one on tour. I'm going with Houston. And then the other one that I threw in is Valspar, just because I love Valspar. Do you think that any of those are on the potential chopping block, or what would you sub in instead of them?
The first, when you put those up, the one that comes to mind first that looks like an issue is Valspar, because it's already got booted from the Florida swing. So I have concerns there.
Okay.
We're going to have some fun with this. Yeah. I've been thinking about this a lot, and I've been listening a lot. The break week between the AFC Championship, between Championship Sunday, right, and the Super Bowl, there's that off week. Right. Torrey.
Yeah.
Think about the guy that's in charge of the FCC. When did he start his season? Just saying. WM Phoenix Open loves the Super Bowl. Then you back it up with the Super Bowl week. Then you're going to do some combination of AT&T and Riviera. The big thing in 28 with Riviera is they host the Olympics in the summertime. Right. It's not that they didn't just host the Genesis and the Women's U.S. Open, but you have to consider that. I think that those events are still kind of sitting in that place, or maybe they go into some playoff rotation. And then after that, you're going to come to Florida. You're going to hit Doral. You're going to hit Bay Hill. You're going to hit the Players. I get lost after that.
Yeah.
I would prefer Colonial. You would prefer Colonial. Charles Schwab gives a lot of money to the Champs Tour, not Champs Series Tour.
Yeah.
The 50+ tour. So if they have to jump to 30 million for 1 week to go to Colonial, I mean, I would prefer Colonial over Memorial Park, but Memorial Park's not a bad golf course. I don't disagree with that one. Then now you've got Augusta, certainly RBC, and I think you could include the Canadian Open. I think that people feel there was a lot of backlash when it was like, if Canadian Open makes the cut, and Rory starts saying things and people are kind of speculating or whatever. I don't think it goes to one of those fall international events. I think it becomes, and if you're Royal Bank of Canada, and you're sponsoring 2 signature events currently, like which one are you going to really lean into?
Yeah, you want the Canadian Open.
I don't know, but that makes sense to me. All
My
of these
question there, though, is the Open status. Do they have to relinquish that? Because there's technically no way for Canadians or other guys, if you're locked into this championship series and this group of 130 guys and you take 120 of them, you kind of remove that element from it, which is why I don't have Scottish on here either, frankly, is because the uncertainty of those being open championships, and this is not technically an open tournament anymore, leaves some lack of clarity there for me.
I mean, that's a tremendous point that obviously I didn't think of running my mouth over here. So you're spot on there, but you can start to see how this schedule comes together. The bigger events are still going to be these bigger events, and it's going to work its way through. You're going to see your breaks, Cog Week, Zurich, like we talked about earlier. But, you're pretty close to spot on here for sure.
Okay. Here's where we have a little fun. The other idea I had in Texas, because I do feel like they have to go there. I feel like Colonial is the obvious one. Next year, Frisco hosts the PGA Championship, but maybe that becomes a permanent mark in 2029. Here's where they want these new markets, right? The specific regions that Brian Rolapp mentioned are Boston, Denver, New York, Philadelphia, San Francisco, Seattle, Washington, D.C. I think it was a brilliant strategy by him to throw all of those locations out there, knowing that they weren't going to be able to go to all of them, because now these sort of, if you have a golf course there, if you have a sponsor that is kind of natural hub there, it becomes a bidding war for these spots. So purely speculative here, but here are my choices, which I think could end up being in there. I think they go to New York, and I think that probably is Bethpage. For me, I think that Liberty National, did I get that right, or is it National Liberty? Liberty National, I think I had in the running, but if I were to pick a New York course that I think would be most open to hosting an annual tournament on this new championship series, the one for me was Bethpage. Do you have any other you throw in the mix there?
I don't think our friends at Ridgewood, Bethpage is interesting. Liberty National gets the BMW next year. Okay. So they'll have an opportunity to show off. And
it's beautiful. I just felt like the players didn't like that place. Am I wrong there?
At first, they hated it. The greens needed to be softened. But by the time we got to the last version there, the one that Finau won in the playoff, the 2017 President's Cup, all of that was well received. Yes. I mean, those are the most logical choices for sure.
Okay. The next one I'm going to take on the Denver region, just because I feel that region is completely void in kind of the Rocky Mountains, middle of the United States, of any sort of tournament. And I'm going to do Castle Pines. Right there outside of Denver. They have history with the PGA Tour. They hosted the BMW before. Cherry Hills is up there, obviously. Yep. It was the second city that was mentioned by Brian Rolapp, and the second time that he's mentioned Denver. So I do feel like they need something in this region. I went Castle Pines, and then my last two are complete long shots. They want to go to Boston. I think this is highly unlikely, but I know they love themselves some Gil Hanse golf courses at the PGA Tour. So I did Boston Golf Club. It's probably TPC Boston is the favorite in that region, and I would love to see them go back to Philly Cricket Club as my final stop, as they kind of knock off, the Philly, DC, New Jersey region is all kind of localized there, and I think that you could knock off a couple of them with that one. Now, this does not factor in San Francisco. This does not factor in Seattle, which were the other two that they mentioned. Your thoughts on this, and just throw out maybe one or two other courses that maybe you've heard rumblings of that you've been in the media center.
A little bit of recency bias here. You go out to Shinnecock. There's 1 million people. It becomes somewhat of a logistical nightmare. Yeah. I travel a bunch with the tour. In order to start this and look at these markets, I would look for mid-majors. Now, I know I'm as a tri-state area in New Jersey, around New York, I would love for there to be a PGA Tour event. But when you come to Charlotte or up here in Connecticut, or you go to, again, these mid-markets, the fans show up.
Columbus. Yeah.
Columbus. Oh my God. Great example. Right.
Perfect.
So I look at Seattle as a better alternative than New York. I think Boston is great because they never even go up to that. I mean, I know we're here in Connecticut, but they never go up to that corner. I think that is great. But like Chambers Bay, Sahaley up there in the corner, like those are fantastic places to go. The guy behind me doesn't like that, but hey, I think the more they lean into mid majors, the better off. Mid major cities, the better off we will be. As far as the events goes, the fans, I just remember going down to Miami and it seemed like there was just nobody there because it was Miami. It had no juice. And then a week later, I'm in Charlotte and there's people everywhere going nuts. And, the community really embraced it. The volunteers are really engaged. All of it was like, and it was the same 70 guys, and it was a world-class facility. And, timing is everything in life.
Yeah, timing is everything. Speaking of timing, I know you've got a trip to make home. I don't want to hold you any longer. I appreciate you breaking down all the facts. As I said it once, I've said it a million times. Your information from inside the ropes, from inside the media center, from at these courses, from at Cromwell this week is absolutely invaluable. You are the leader of the Read the Line bunch, and we are proud to follow you. Thanks, Keith, for joining me tonight on this emergency pod as we had to get something out there with the big news that shook the world on Tuesday morning.
Well, hey, Joe, you're the host of this show, and I want to ask you one question. When you heard the news and you saw the document that I passed along to you prior to the press conference, what was your initial feeling?
Excitement.
What did you think?
Excitement. Happy. More events. When I saw the match play thing, I was over the moon, but just understanding I felt clarity with the PGA Tour, and I felt like when I'm in a position as the host of a show to explain it to some people who may be really deep into the tour like we are, but also to explain it to my dad and the golf buddies that I play with on the weekend who sometimes watch this show, I felt like the context would be much easier for them to understand, which is ultimately good for the game. It's good for us. So I was excited.
Hey, man, anytime I get on a pod with you, I'm excited. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Enjoy. Everyone have a great night. Subscribe to the Read the Line YouTube channel. Give us a comment. Give us a like. We appreciate the heck out of you guys. We'll catch you next time. Peace out.